Hello, my name is Anthony Wall. I am not a journalist. And you have to be licensed to be a journalist to make sure that they follow rules. But that and how the license to be a journalist is being used for them to pretend opinions and convictions, pretending, and preventing mandated law simultaneously as evidence, as styles of preventing it, as evidence, as natures of preventing it, as evidence, recorded consciously needing to hide. They're actually recorded criminal seriousness natures. I am not a lawyer. It is also evidence, originally and still, how there was an entrenched in our nation, in our country, since before our founding parents were born. Before kings were even born. The ones and the phenomena of distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous modern nations that were in collusion with that breaching method here. But it was also because of how they were sickly, distinctly victims of that breaching method there. And this is a completely fact-cheating nature-oriented one. Oriented predicate acts delivery system method. There are all kinds of natures of motivations for roles with fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts. And that was sustained effectively to sustain increasing needs for actual physical predicate acts, like murder, like torture, like identity thefts, like identity fraud, like the worst in war crimes method with that predicate acts delivery system method, keeping and forcing kept self-value, blamed on other things other than selves. What really was forcing, sustained, and increasing nature, demonstrating negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. And see, and natures, like criminal and citizens natures, in relationship to that predicate act delivery system method, all as fact-cheating nature had roles with forced, but then how self-defended. See, that's not forced now. And all exceptions in exception nature, our opinions and convictions, delusions wrought using criminally foreign influence premises treatments, simultaneously dishonest and predatory, preventing people from calm means to counter fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts, where and how they are juxtaposed with sustained criminally foreign influence uses of all locations, areas, states, private databases, and campus databases at the same time. Then they make you have arguments with strangers while simultaneously people you don't know at all from your town were pretending other, and people you only know in context actually recorded other than they have been pretending, and per how they are kept in layers criminally foreign influenced with overt criminal enterprises. We have all identity of the ground. Victim predators. That's why. In other words, follow mandated law. They pretend that CNN has sources associated with foreign and domestic countries that have roles with psychology and with crime methods, where they have where they have psychologists, in other words, here and there, with crime methods, with logic, and then pretending other. They have the phrase, the perfect world, recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, involved with the logic, interbranch and private tied to them. Again, criminally foreign influence delusions wrought, incapable of following mandated law, and because they already did what they need to hide from what is actually recorded, and they need to value that, not by accident, as victims, but not by accident facilitated the means to hide how victim predators. This is where all database relationships are kept victims of what they are then kept victim predators, need to highlight progressions where it's exploited off campuses. So they have people that have interactions pretend because of the way they have the nature of governments, modern nations, They also have every single modern nation victims of what they're also victim predator roles with these physical delusions, with the overall convictions about what is positive, what is true, what is identity. Their roles with a database illusion stacking method, sequence shift roles. They're pretending because they're trying to judge the character of other people and have their kids doing this per a method actually recorded, forcing context where they're going to be, where they're lying about what was that those contexts were actually set up for and as, and what is actually recorded. So they have the intelligence community. I believe it's the guy's name, Bob Woodward. I'm not sure, but associated with like journalism for a long time. See, this is where all these hundreds of nations that possessed America originally and still, because we entertained what our founding parents didn't have time to counter, because they didn't have free speech, because everyone had speech forced by the predicate acts delivery system method. Specifically, you have positive and negative treatments as criminal insidious nature, self-value. Specifically to have branches of all identities of the law, different, individually grouped in together, but all fake sides of correlation nature, self-valued that too. That difference to get over on their true and our own true difference, all as victim predators. Identity is being used in ways that no one fathomed, because free speech and science, not grounded to an abridged form, never came manifest. This is what the ancient gaming system is about. So I guess I need to use the C language. I can't decide if I have to use the C language or Python. And then the IDE. So I have to decide simultaneous things. Because there is one identity that is the only definition, for example. That is all definitions at once. All exceptions and exception nature actually examine they're in demonstration of the same thing. For example, the word/value simultaneous is an exception, and it is an exception nature. But it's also in demonstration of the same thing, because its nature is a trinity the same way the cells of our body are, as three complete identities. For example, a value/value progression, individually grouped and together, also one body together, a complete identity. But that complete identity is also semi-nature relationship to the complete of the cell. The cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall are three distinct. I'm not a doctor either. Also, recorded evidences are the self-valued roles for self-value. This is where victim predators. This is a predicate acts delivery system method that you can't stay around mad all the time. This is a sustained breaching method. It is evidence that and how no one prevents anyone from serious proper treatments of slavery, simultaneously while by pretending passions and emotions and defending that. For example, all as styles preventing of defenses of that, for example, but needed to pretend passions and emotions are one thing, only in relationship to one identity of volume. Where and how the perfect world forsaken, quality of truth, quality of premises treatments, identity treatments proper, originally still. No one has allowed logic without criminal foreign influences. And that's how to think. The only reason there are 5 bonded semi-natures and 3 bonded, as the 3 bonded semi-natures, and in demonstration of invisible but still discernible. What are the 5? Sequence true before the order of the finite. as that identity of volume that came from before physics, that generated physics, as that identity of value progression, simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as the value of physics, individually grouped and together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, with this in demonstration to it. Each. So Wethersfield Police, they've been recently and through time rolls with wire crimes and wire crime methods associated with, for example, where and how a bunch of all kinds of bad things, even murders, would have been prevented if they allowed free speech. The same people charged with defending free speech, they need to pretend other, for example. So they are offensively needing and valuing kept needed by a breaching method that's a criminally foreign influence maintenance to all locations, areas, and states in its control. But through us as fact treatment nature, blaming other things other than self, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, all locations, areas, and states. All leaders, no matter how powerful you get, these are styles manifest as the identities of the law of each state, of each location, of each area. So many ways there are points of correlation and of discorrelation that are in demonstration of the same exploited identity of value progression, native pure, no matter who you are. Increasingly, the Native American identity becomes divergent from our own because they are not, and we are not permitted the native identity of science proper. We would have had revelations and answers revealed. People pretending not to realize that are involved with this worse than extortion method, but it is also methods of extortion and things like that that become are stayed manifest because of how it is individually grouped and together, distinctly and non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Roles were fit with that predicate acts delivery system method that is true always and not denying exceptions. A simple subject inseparable from where and how. The simple is being obfuscated about American history by people that know the most about it so they could hide the sequence shifts up front, so they could hide correlation nature up front for how they were kept victim predators. Each science. So forgiveness is so we don't have ourselves fighting as knaves, which forces uses precedents and statutes reliant upon defenses of self-value, criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, identity treatments, finite active progressive treatments. There are 5 bonded identities of volume, and there are 3 bonded identities of volume of the same identity of volume /S that more and more is being made of and as one identity of as science /S. See, the Constitution is supposed to be liberated from its forced, abridged state and breaching methods collusion with that act tied to all identity of the ground locations, sickly differentially and constantly, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously leveraged against each person of each identity of the ground location. Since before computers, as a database oriented and database furthered, but first and before that, while being that, and further from forcing that, collusion at all locations level, where we were and how we are quality as fact treatment nature, as syntax treatment nature, And my name is Anthony Wall. I'm going to teach you about nature. Nature has an identity. It is an identity of value/value progression. Correlation is evidence. Sequence true is evidence. Exceptions in exception nature /S is evidence. Our evidence is. Where evidence is. Self-value. Sickly distinctly by all sickly distinctly victims. Needing to react as fact-cheaping nature to a predicate acts delivery system method that is exploiting how it knew that victim defenses of criminally foreign influence, tricked, hurt, persuaded, internation relations. Victim reactions to that, not knowing how to react, not understanding it completely, but understanding part of it. They knew that they could invest people to fact-cheaping nature defenses of the law, of the sciences, each simultaneously, of their identity ground locations. As victims, needed to use those sciences, needed to value them as the best they could have them, more and more, simultaneously self-valuing them abridged through defense, but not realizing while they're valuing self-abridged sciences, the perfect world forsaken through counters to things wrongly know, defenses of that. That was what was propagated. That is the value, the agenda, the want, the need of this predicate acts delivery system method, which is an identity theft /fraud rule method. The slash is a semi-nature with the this video is getting long. Boxing is strong. So by stacking predicate acts and roles with them as wrongdoers, wrongdoing, they have police forms, and they have a whole bunch of foreign and domestic, other than just our police. And they have the campuses that train those police, and with the sciences abridged. So, for example, simultaneous is an exception, and is exception nature, but only partially, and demonstration of it being the same thing as this identity inseparable from all others. And while it is as them, there is one identity of volume per science and per logic's needs to have discerned as a science. You need to have scientific values discerned to be able to go further with it, with correlation, not just with incomes and industries from and as abridged from the science of positive and negative truth, identity, truth. See, identity, truth, and positive are bonded, grouped definitions. The same identity, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, is positive, is truth. See, but this is 5 identities of truth. A criminal insidiousness nature is recorded, needing to value, sequence truth before the order of the finite, with subjects, valued, lied about, having been lied about. And that is relevant to where and how the order of the finite, the smallest thing, the order of it too, the value of that too. I mean, the value of the smallest thing and the value of the order of it, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, from and with and as, and the value of the order of sequence true before that again. So those are two identities of sequence nature / simultaneous nature. Bonded the same way the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall are. And this is why cell walls come together as conduit to body of value discernment. Its identity of invisible but still discernible identity of value / value progressions, discernment. So, in other words, there are a whole bunch of other nations and for our own military, other militaries, involved with a whole bunch of medicine drug crimes and overt drug crimes that are juxtaposed with and as legal identities, that are juxtaposed with uses of their life progressions vertically and horizontally, and kept back to campuses from off them. And that kept further to collusion off all locations with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and what is fluent through our nation's self-value. So we have self-value, criminally foreign influenced zoning laws, things that are positive and negative simultaneously, both positive and negative used offensively to keep employed with all locations per off the records, but actually recorded. The physical delusions themselves, the styles of criminal and seditious nature self-value themselves, all offensively preventing mandated law. What is Jim Crow laws about? Always not denying exceptions, not denying exception nature. It's not just about a predicate acts delivery system method. It's about how that method was overtly simple, easy to discern, designed specifically by and as that one entrenched here, that method entrenched here since before our founding parents were born. They, through James Madison's plan, where do you think they got the power and the might simultaneous enough to counter all those sick nations? Forced seclusion, never inseparable. Slavery was sickly in the North and in the South. He had to leave slavery in the North. Had to leave as evidence his collusion with that, while he and his collusion with James Madison to overcome it. They'll know, in other words, when they say, "Oh, our founders," this book says he owned slaves. Those books, what people were saying and hearing, was criminally foreign influenced. It was delusions raw. It was tactically separated from the identity of sophistication that revealed the republic for which we stand in ancient times, since before semi-ancient times, that came before modern nations' religions in latter semi-ancient times. In semi-ancient times, before modern nations' religions, an archetypal criminal enterprise had been leveraged against America. For example, this is and against every modern nation. Semi-ancient nations were propagated not just as, but to a trap that is greater than that and less than that, while being its complete identity of semi-nature, the dependency to itself, rather than the system /S as its own system. That identity of science that reveals evolution's fruits and gifts. It does not separate and is the identity that grounds identity of relationship to itself and the value of that simultaneously, that which is native pure system. See, we have evolution, we have truths about what evolution is. Maintained, breaching method maintained, self-value, even though it hurts people. Even where it helps people, it's a demonstration of the same thing. So we have to be able to talk about how they did this with the identity of the industries. They're victims. If they're us. So we're all victims. So the industries are victims. But the industries aren't us. And the industries aren't going to speak for us. So they maintain them. We're having policies. So they have a Woodruff guy pretend involved with spying on the president, and way worse. And then pretending for example, pretending he's against people yelling. He doesn't even know about the conversation because he's involved with predicate acts. For example, with a whole bunch of nations, intercities connected, on and off Fox Connecticut News, on and off WFSB, on and off Central Connecticut State University, on and off other campuses like UConn, with the people involved with predicate acts, on and off Central Connecticut State University before the World Trade Center attack. They were also involved intercities, on and off campuses with relevant predicate acts, allusions put in databases, and roles with other natures of organized crime and organized crime acts and uses of them with all identity of the ground locations. Roles with investigations, investigators, and vetting identities recorded originally and still needed to hide from correlation nature's simultaneous value, which is greater than or less than itself, and while it has its value. So, the exception and the exception nature, that is what is simultaneous as definition, more so than the word simultaneous, is that one scientifically discernible identity of value / value progression. The 5 parts of each being, of each person. The 5 parts are sequence true, always, not denying any exceptions. That's one. The second one is the order of the finite and the value of the finite as the value / value progression of the finite. That's 2. These are 2 also identities of positive, distinct, and non-distinct, and simultaneous. These are 2 identities of truth, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous. These are 2 identities of identity, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous. No, there was what is active also. That's the 3rd one. The 4th one is what is progressive, our progressive value. See, we have a pathology, and that's not per the definitions as the medical whatever. That's like metaphorical. This is the identity of metaphor / S. This one identity the sciences share. But a science is defended, abridged. They have to defend roles with phrases like the perfect world. They have to defend roles blaming on other things and valuing having been blamed on other things other than themselves. Roles with that simple to discern, simple to tell about, predicate acts delivery system method. That American history and that American sciences were about, but we don't have free speech to tell about them. We don't have the free speech to tell about our founding parents. The people supposed to defend our free speech, the people supposed to defend our safety and their own, they are prevented it by the hierarchy of police forms and of interbranch individually grouped and together, already self-valued simultaneously as victim predators now. Sequence shifts. Crime methods that are preventing free speech needed to pretend other, for example, tied to them fabricating audio and video, pretending to be about debate and such legitimately. Wethersfield town offices and Wethersfield police are recorded actively and having been actively involved through decades with recorded on-off campuses connected identity theft, sequence shifts roles that foreign and domestic families have collusion with, and then pretending passions and emotions and relationships to people's behavior they've been lying about. And the response, in other words, this is also mixed with them using and having used, because this investigations and investigators as victims, then defending, treatments of reactions to roles, all roles with a theater, with juxtaposed natures of either evil and of fake integrity of positive, as criminal and seditious natures of positive, fact-cheating nature styles and identities of criminal and seditious natures on a mass scale, relevant to how offensively people are prevented use of correlation and sequence true and identity thefts and frauds as evidence. People are allowed prevented free speech. In other words, so there's a guy, Bob Woodward, and other CNN sources and Fox News sources and WFSB sources and people that work for them. Investigators' investigations and vetting identities associated with CCSU, Central Connecticut State University, leading up to the World Trade Center attack. There's a Gary Sasso. He demonstrated, confessed, recorded, confirmed roles with people who confess. Who he doesn't know all the confessions, demonstrated, but he's associated with investigators' investigations and vetting identities leading up to the World Trade Center that also have remote uses of Oprah Winfrey, for example, and of Gayle King. That's evidence. That network attached me and my family to fake words, fake locations, fake sequence relationships, fake relationships to others. They also have interbranch recorded roles with KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, and identity thefts and frauds roles with black and white female judges, and with a principal child offender, and a whole bunch of people further with his campus with juxtaposed natures of organized crime through time connected intercities from my town, Wethersfield, Connecticut, to Central Connecticut State University. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed victims from campuses influenced to roles with the predicate acts of a minority with that campus, involved with what keeps a majority at all the campuses criminally foreign influenced and delusions wrought and exploited that way. So they have all kinds of natures of sequence shift self-value. They have to hide that. They have to value hurt the people of all locations when they have to react to real, worse than just criminal incompetence as all identities of the law and their opinions, as all news reporting bodies. It is evidences that and how they have physical delusions and crime natures that prevent people of calm means to defend ourselves with words against fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts, also recorded in collusion with physical and time-oriented predicate acts, and the natures of impositions, and uses of them sustained. Not one has trained. So there are a bunch of people that are recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with intelligence community and with that with the uses of that phrase. See, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. But CNN and Fox News and local news, they prevent as victims, but as victim predators, they prevent and defend how they prevent mandated law. They use crime methods of preventing simple acts from being told on and from being subject, by themselves contributing physical delusions, sequence shifts, and fabricated audio and video, with the interbranch that has been doing the same thing, forging names, switching names, lying about the behavior of others, attaching lies to truths about the behaviors of others, attaching sequence shifts, using that to pretending because of their roles also, which are relevant. They have confessions, demonstrations of their roles with child abuses. Then they lie about when they hear the responses. They lie about when people's behavior. The FBI has recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed. They'll pretend others simultaneously too. That's evidence simultaneous. That's inseparable. But their roles with their behavioral people, all their fact-keeping agents, all the identities of the law, the agencies, every modern nations, when they speak, discernible are their criminal foreign influences. They're as victims, but as criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, identity treatments, time treatments, science treatments. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of it. Those who know the most about American history, they are in collusion with that originally still preventing discernment of what Marbury versus Madison, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice, really means. I was taught by my father, an accomplished pro se litigant, who had no criminal record, only breaking park rules. Now there are people involved, intercities, with predicate acts against me that had predicate acts against him recorded that he missed and didn't get to tell about. But I found out about them because I didn't realize it at the time, but people associated, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, in and out of court, involved with Robert Luskin, leading up to a 2006 case. And in that case, they had roles with him with relevant predicate acts on and off Fox Connecticut News and on and off buildings and around downtown Hartford associated with them. And their roles with predicate acts on and off child campuses. Off them in relationship to illusions with line progressions needed in relationship to them. So the specific crime acts are the subject. See, it's also how they have the branches of government individually grouped in together with all these other nations and overt criminal enterprises and private database relationships, tied groups, and influences simultaneously recorded, how kept, needed to hide the same sequence shifts, finite active progressive lies, identity thefts, frauds, roles, natures of that, and uses of it. So these are people I don't know at all, tied to people that I only know because they sought me out to make natures of confessions per their roles with sequence shifts. For example, pretending not to realize where and how that was showing that they were lying. One of the things. And then now the courts are recorded and confessed and demonstrated with the police forms, individually and group crime methods like distinctly, non-distinctly, something like pretending, well, if people confess such or whatever, or communicate such, why would you have hang around with them? I didn't hang around with them. I didn't necessarily seek those people out. All exceptions in exception nature are a demonstration of that too. Also tied to them forcing people to speak through others. Also tied to and as people involved with interbranch forging and switching names, as the courts that were involved with the locations crimes relevant and crime roles relevant leading up to the World Trade Center attack, and in the context /S and since. In the context of the responses to it, and in the counters to the responses to it. Recorded effectively breaching method here or there undiscerned, discerned only to extents they think are other reasons, because they were raised by pseudo-sophistication here and everywhere, wherein how this method knew that sophistication is going to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and demonstration of how the sciences are abridged. Therefore, human fact, human nature experts are abridged states of themselves as our identity of volume as it actually is. Therefore, they are predatory styles and natures of debaters who delusions wrought at the same time, that are sequence shifting too, so they're preventing people counters to where and how it is recorded how our locations, areas, and states and campuses are effectively kept victim predators, criminally foreign influenced. There are people's interbranch associated with narratives, why and how they had me go to in Rocky Hill High School. They have people associated with putting telling me to teach kids how to do a movie. But they also had the people involved with that, with juxtaposed natures of organized crime, acts, predicate acts, with prosecutors and judges, and their roles with drug crimes and sexual abuses and natures of that our agencies and judges and prosecutors and states attorneys and programs Washington, D.C. and World Trade Center have tied to our campuses. Whole bunch of federal natures of federal criminals and uses of them, and people just undercover, and involved with relevant predicate acts roles, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with his co-defendants, and with other nations leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since, with criminal uses of Hartford courts remotely, and of New Britain courts remotely. They but completely recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with sequence shifts and with predicate acts and identity thefts and frauds, with campuses, intercities leading up to the World Trade Center attack and through time. So, whether people associated with the Wethersfield police and their families also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed using the sense and sensibilities of victims of real bad things, including the World Trade Center, to further their cover-ups for their roles with all those other nations. As victim predators, though, per their roles with all these other natures of organized crime that are bound and that they self-value, in relationship to how they prevent free speech with the directors and the other police forms that are recorded relevant, tied to their roles with predicate acts through the news, that are inclusion with and as their motivations, and acts that are inclusion with acts with locations, worst crimes. They've been attaching fake things to them. They've been having to hide live aggressions. They've been having to self-value with the training of the police forms. And then where they go from there, the live aggressions from there. Because those are trainings and identities built that are only capable of hiding from and hurting and valuing hurt, correlation nature, simultaneously inherent active and progressive means, as a style /S. See, they're all styles other than this one that is the only one that is all styles at the same time, also positive to itself. It's the perfect world, valued, forsaken offensively, is manifest, where that was exploited by a predicate acts delivery system method by criminal and seditious natures, wrongdoers, and wrongdoing propagation method, where that wrongdoing furthers whole predicate acts delivery system methods bound by one. So there's a Gary Sasso. He doesn't know the extent of it because everyone was speaking through other people. But he's recorded. They said he's recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed. And I never did anything bad to him. Any exception nature. He might, but he's in other words, he's recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, involved with people that are involved with predicate acts through time, intercities with child abuses, other natures of organized crime against elderly at the same time. And while they are in collusion with people that are the only counters to that. And so they also have roles with locations, crimes, natures of even sexual roles with, everyone's speaking through other, and roles even with sexual natures of crimes with kids. Not him personally, physically. I don't know what, actually, yeah, because of what he's describing. And people with DCF involved with that. So these are people with the news agencies, investigators, investigations, and vetting identities. They're already used criminally with areas where they were putting truths that they could use to lie in courts because they were needed to hide life aggressions because they already had predicate acts in cases. Cases I don't even know the people in. All cases, too, many ways recorded, as actually recorded. So they're starting fights between people, but they've also had that being done. And that was also exploited by what everyone self-valued, not discerned for all juxtaposed reasons. Missing how? Non-distinctly. So from all along routes from my town, like to see Central Connecticut State University in Britain, Connecticut. I'm in Wethersfield, Connecticut. There are people all along that route with the phenomenon of roles, with predicate acts, with people associated with with like CNN sources, and the people that place ads, the companies that place ads locally and nationally and internationally. See, because we have styles maintained here and there of premises treatments, of truth treatments, as criminal and seditious nature that simultaneously can't afford that which is simple to correlate, afforded, discerned, and in a protracted way. They can't afford discern the identity that ratiocination and pseudo-ratiocination share. So recorded as evidence originally and still, they self-value physical delusions with, and crime acts and methods, roles with, locations, with all tied to them, including doctors, who recorded and involved also with crimes with their patients and criminals, further on off a principal child defender's campus, then and now, as the ones intercities from here through time recorded and involved with other natures of organized crime with the same campus, with the same people that came through it as victims, so they could use their names as victim predators. They could use my name through other people same way. Frustrated reactions. I don't know. I think it's Dana Knislis, I don't know, and Kevin Knislis and their parents, I don't know. I never had a conversation with, like, one parents of other with a Kevin Knislis. Years later, that's tied to, and a Rick Sam Faglione. Years later, though, I did see him because he sought me out to make confessions and to record and demonstrate roles also with what they had to hide. With like a Leahy family that pretended conversations with me through time with prosecutors and judges Brian Silver is also, I never had a conversation with him. He's one of the prosecutors recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with families involved with child abuses of juxtaposed natures, and of roles with uses of how they have types of experts used to cover up how they have roles with juxtaposed natures of organized crime against each age, self-value. Because those identities of law originally still were used remotely since before electronic definitions of remote. Our nature forces this. See, our free speech and a true soul reveals and uses evidences and convictions by and opinions by correlation nature that are tactically, that what they make opinions and convictions in relationship to is tactically ulterior from, including with physical delusions, because of their roles with violence. Where you're involved with predicate acts and violence, you need, and that is fact-cheating nature oriented, that is evidences oriented, and collusion with physical, male crimes, wire crimes, murders, body dumping spots, uses of the body dumping spots, uses of the locations and the people tied to the locations next to the body dumping spots. This taught me more about identity than computers. All parts of computers are about identity. So intercities through time. There are people associated with programs. Like Docker, you bring up Docker, they bring up a theme like the Dreamers, because they have sickly distinctly each nation victim of what is forced self-value by those nations, or bad things happen for those nations. Hundreds of nations, A1 through Z, however many nations there are, have this fluent through our nations. A predicate acts delivery system method that is maintenance to propagated, to breaching method propagated, fact-cheating natures, and fact-cheating nature styles. Sequence shifting styles. Identity theft, frauds, roles. So, there are a whole bunch of people associated with the intelligence community, also associated with Wethersfield Pizza, that is recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed, also involved with a whole bunch of people on off 2 Route Highway in Wethersfield, Connecticut, that are involved with predicate acts with AT&T and with FBI and with foreign and domestic military and with other agencies and with judges and with their family members involved with predicate acts on off, no as illusions too, no, on off campuses relevant as their roles with identity theft, fraud, sequence shift roles, uses of, that through time. I just remind vaccines. So I forgot what is simultaneous. Three. The Trinity is simultaneous. It is also simultaneously inside of a Trinity that is making more of itself through temporary / lasting. Trinity being made from inside this. So from inside it looks like, on paper, it appears to be 5, and is 5, distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously from how it is, and while as how it is 3. Not just sequence, true, identity of the finite, active, progressive. In other words, the people stacking in New York City. To understand that using science, you have to understand how the suburbs, Wethersfield, Connecticut, where we have slavery, we have a pathology of homes, that was forced before slavery. I mean, with slavery was forced and left entrenched here in the North between New York and Boston. In New York, in Boston, in Massachusetts, sickly distinctly from how in the South. The counter to it was forced to be distinct and non-distinct and simultaneous, but incomplete. So to complete it, they had to throw up like an alley-oop, or they had to pass out a Hail Mary pass. But we never caught it. We had the people of knowledge offensively against simple logic, proper nature of convictions, of opinions, of fact-keeping nature, of syntax nature. See, what value science is abridged cannot but help self-value. How there are so many parts to a computer, and how they could use, and how it was used and is used. The simple means to explain that is the circuit going through a computer. There are temporary / lasting space locations. That space can be used for logic to follow not just equations. This is about correlation nature's identity. This is about Lagrange's identity, which came from before, while being its identity, and while being an identity of sequence / simultaneously nature, simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Further, also relevantly bonded, invisible but discernible here. Boxings, prepare. English was revealed to teach this. English was revealed to teach about evolution. So there's a Mike Domain, I barely know him. I barely know him, that he's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with predicate acts on our Fox Connecticut News in cases, and with people, with prosecutors and judges involved with an Allison Mulcahy, recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with them with identity thefts, frauds. I never had a conversation with her in my life, never had a class with her, never had anything to do with her. She's also involved with former director of the FBI. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by a Thaddeus Grabowski right before a 2006 case involved with him with insidious things outside of Fox Connecticut News. There are ways to show that was juxtapose his roles with juxtaposed natures of organized crime and of roles with the uses of those crime acts, predicate acts, in databases, sequence shifts in databases, and on and off campuses. So we have people on and off Two-Route Highway and all the streets connected to it, all along Route 3, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. People from Church Street and where it touches Main Street, in the corner house in Wethersfield, Connecticut. That's right around the corner from that is the Webb House. Then they changed the name Webb Stevens House. I note that, so they're going to try to adapt. They have people who are associated with uses of the phrase Italian community and uses of the statutes that are in collusion with black and white and all these other nations, with our own. Also with KKK, Confederate flag-themed predicate acts, and cover-up styles pretending passions and emotions. Because there are recorded roles with identity theft, sequence shifts, investigations, methods and crime methods of asking questions, so they can pretend to hear things and just faking recorded. This is also, Interbranch has been attaching people to fake words through time, and the people around everyone. Anyone starts to get on a correlation nature.